Hello, welcome to the live stream. Today we are just doing a bit of a studio tour, so I'm going to take you through all the gear that I've got in my studio and how everything's all set up for making videos in one take, for live streams, and also for virtual events and Zoom calls and everything else. Because actually, at its core, really the superpower is Ecamm Live. That's the live production software that I use on the Mac, and that allows me to do all of the sort of camera switching, scene switching, bring on different information up onto the screen, and so on, all just with the touch of a few Stream Deck buttons. So I've got a few buttons down here, and so if I want to switch to that camera, I'm pressing a button here. If I want to switch back, I'm pressing to this one. So people do sometimes comment in my videos about my seamless editing, and it's because there is no editing. It's all just done in one take with no edits with Ecamm. And that brings me on then to another thing which I'll mention, which is, when we look at other people's studio setups, sometimes it's easy to think that, you need to have all of this stuff to be able to do all of the things that we're going to see today with just camera switching and all of that kind of thing. I've just come off the back of delivering a 2-week course all about Ecamm, the Ecamm Live Accelerator. And one of the things that I mentioned right at the beginning, and I'll mention it again here, is really, in my case, Ecamm Live is the thing that is doing the heavy lifting. And my studio has evolved over the past sort of 5 years or so, and slowly adding more and more things in. I am going to say that all the things that I'm adding in are adding basically diminishing returns to the production quality. And if you go and look at my initial videos on YouTube, although I would like to think that I've maybe advanced a little bit in terms of not so many filler words and a little bit more natural on camera, that's just come through practice, the actual core content itself has not been dramatically improved by adding another 3 camera angles and all of these kind of things. They're nice to haves, but really in terms of your studio, you can absolutely start with even just your mobile phone can be brought into Ecamm Live as a camera, and so yeah, you can just bring that in. Use I would recommend upgrading your microphone if you haven't got a decent mic yet. That is the one thing that is going to be a really great investment. And if you're not using Stream Deck, then absolutely a Stream Deck is the other thing. But once you've got those 2 things, all of these other things that we're going to talk about are nice to have, really. So I only mention that because it's easy to look at other people's setups and think we need all this stuff to actually create, and none of this is intended to be, hey, look at all this gear that you need to start doing it. So that's my little public service announcement, and something out of the way before we get into it, anything at all. So I'll just mention this one. Hey, first of all, Mr. Hicks, great to see you here. And yeah, we've just had a bit of a backstage thing before we started, and I think somebody might have just bought 3 lights while we're getting ready to go live. So yeah, but great to see you here as always, Mr. Hicks. Now that's funny, this doesn't come through in the chat. And Gary, great to see you here as well. Been on the Ecamm Accelerator for the past 2 weeks. So let's just start then with giving a bit of a tour of the gear I've got. And by all means, feel free to jump in at any point. If you've got any questions as I'm talking through these things, then you can always feel free to shout out, drop any comments into the chat or any questions that you've got as I go through. But I'm just going to run through I guess, let's start with lighting, and then we'll go to audio and video and some of the other things that we've got in the studio. Start with lighting, because we were literally talking about this in the Zoom backstage before we started. So what I've got in terms of the lights in my studio, and maybe I'll just show you a couple of quick camera angles first of all. And we've gone to over here. You can see my desk. This has gone into its AI mode. Let me try and just bring that back to auto tracking. I'll get that back in a moment. But here you can see my setup on the desk here. So I've got my Rodecaster for audio, and then I've got my Stream Decks. I'll talk about this monitor a little bit later, and then my main monitor, and over there I've got my camera in the teleprompter, and I've got a screen down here which is showing me actually the Zoom backstage at the moment, and a few other monitors around the place as well. But in terms of lighting, what you're seeing is, and this is the concept of 3-point lighting, which is a really useful thing to understand. With 3-point lighting, basically, if you imagine I'm sort of sitting here, and then in the front to my left-hand side, we've got what is known as the key light. That is kind of like your primary light that is illuminating your face. And if you imagine having some light just on one side, it's going to create some shadows. And so we want to fill in those shadows. And so we have this second light here, which is called the fill light. Now, in my case, those 2 lights are slightly different sizes. So this is a Nanlite Forza 60. In fact, both of them are Nanlite Forza 60, which means it's a 60-watt light. But the actual softbox at the front here, which is this big light attachment, this one is 90 centimeters or 3 foot, and this one is 60 centimeters or 2 foot. Now, the reason why you have such large lights is basically the larger the diameter of the light, the softer the light you're going to get from it. So it's going to give you a sort of softer effect of the lighting on your face. If you imagine just getting a little small torch and pointing that at your flashlight, then it's going to be really sort of harsh sort of lighting on your face because it's just this really small point source. So the wider the diffusion we can have on the front of it, as I say, the softer the lighting effect you're going to get from it. Now, you could have two exactly the same size. And in fact, although I said, this is the key light and this is the fill light, so the idea of the fill light is it's going to fill in those shadows. The sort of difference between those two, the sort of ratio of the intensity of one to the other, is going to dictate the sort of look that you have on camera. And if you think about a newsreader, then usually they've got pretty even lighting on either side. And so almost the concept of fill light and key light is lost because they're just both the same size. They're evenly lit across all of their face. But then if you think about some interviews where they want to give maybe a slightly different atmosphere, slightly more, maybe more moody atmosphere, they might have a stronger light on one side than the other. And so one side of the face is going to be more in shadow intentionally. And so there is that sort of balance. I have basically my key light is stronger than my fill light. So it's slightly more intense on this side than on the other one. But you can adjust that and play around with it to get the sort of look that you want and maybe not have it like completely even all the way across. But then there is another light that they have, which is technically called the hair light. I always call it the backlight for obvious reasons. And it's this one that's just over my shoulder. And if I just turn that off, the purpose of the key light, of the backlight, is just to give a little bit of separation between me and the background. So at the moment, I've got this light sort of flooding from the front, but apart from the background being a different color, so that gives it a bit of separation. The point of, as I say, the backlight is just when we turn that one on, you can see how it just sort of illuminates over the back of my shoulder and the back of my head and just gives me that bit of extra separation from the background. Now, if you think about the sort of position of these, we've basically got, the center here, then 45 degrees off to this side, more or less, is the key light, the fill light, 45 degrees off to this side, and then the backlight is kind of opposite the key light, really. It's not an exact science. You can put these slightly different positions. And also in terms of the elevation, they're about sort of 15 degrees above. And one of the other reasons for this, you'll see that, and this is technically true, it puts the sparkle in your eye, they say. So you can see that there is this little dot showing up in my eye, and that's basically because you're seeing the reflection of that. Whereas if you don't have that, it just helps to add some bit of interest into the look in your eyes. So that is a technical reason why they do it as well. But one thing to note though is if you are wearing glasses, you want to just be aware of the sort of reflection path of those lights. So if I was looking into the camera here and then I had the one of the lights at the same angle over this way and was wearing glasses, basically that would sort of bounce straight off the glasses into the camera, and you would get this unwanted reflection in your glasses. So if you are wearing glasses, then just make sure that you've got the lights elevated above, and usually that will inherently mean that they're not reflecting. But if they are slightly, then just a case of maybe adjusting them slightly higher or slightly off to one side or the other, and you can usually correct for that. Bradley Vinson, a great guy in the Ecamm community, he's got a really great solution for glasses, which is he wears glasses with no lenses because they were part of his brand for a long time, and then he got laser corrective surgery, but he still kept wearing the frames because it was just part of his whole brand thing. But it always made me laugh because somebody once asked him, how do you manage to wear glasses and we don't see the glare? And he sort of put his finger through the frame and said there's no lenses in them. So that's another option as well. But that's the point of 3-point lighting. Now, the reason why we were talking about lighting so much in the backstage beforehand is because we were talking about this light over here and this one over here. By the way, whilst we're on this, I will mention that these lights have this thing called a grid on the front. And if I put the camera over to this side, you can see how basically if we're looking at that light from the side, we don't actually see the face of the light, which means that the light is not being sort of spilled onto that particular camera. But as I turn it round, then we can see when we look from here in front of the light, we are actually seeing it. Now, what that is for, and it's just a sort of mesh grid, so it's just really sort of lightweight stuff. But the purpose of that is to direct the light onto the subject or wherever we want it to go to. Now, the reason why I have it on these two lights in particular is because, as you can see on my background, it's quite a dark background technically, and we've got some lights behind there. So those are what is giving that purple color to the background. Actually, if you look at the color of the wall itself, it's this neutral gray. So it's basically just kind of 25% gray. That's the color that the wall is painted. But then when we put colored light onto it, it does a really good job of just reflecting back just that color that we're using. So because I've got those lights there, those are nanlite pavo tubes. Those are basically illuminating the wall and reflecting back. But the reason why that comes through in such a vibrant way is because it doesn't actually have the light from these lights spilling onto it. This one is pointed, the fill light is pointed across me this way. So it's kind of hitting the side wall, and this one is hitting the other side wall. And so it's completely clearing that back wall there. And so that's the reason why we have that thing called a grid on it, is just to control where the light goes. But I mentioned that these are these nanlights that I'm using, and these are 60 centimeter and 90 centimeter softboxes. But one of the things about these is they are huge. Like if you look behind it, there's no light behind there, so it's a bit difficult to see. Whoops, let me try that again. But basically that softbox behind, when you add on the actual light on it as well, that's a bit easier to see. Add on the light fitting that's sort of hanging off the back there, and that's basically, you know, deeper than it is across. And so they do take up an awful lot of space. Whereas if we look at this one here, you can see that these two light fittings, we've got the fill light and the backlight here, they both look exactly the same from the front, more or less. They're the same size and they've both got a grid on it. But actually, if we look at the side of this one, you can see how it is a complete flat panel. And this is the Amaran Verge Max. And it always seemed to me that we used to have a trade-off. Either we were getting, proper studio lights that had these big softboxes behind them, or we were going with a flat panel light, and a flat panel light might be something, that looks like this. So really sort of tiny by comparison. But in actual fact, when Amaran brought out this is basically the light that I'm recommending to everybody. And if I was building my studio again, I would just simply have two of these because, they're just such a good quality light, and also cost effective. So this is about $250, $260, something like that, complete with the stand, so you can mount it to your desk. Compared to the nanlights, which by the time you've bought the light and the softbox, and other brands are similar, whatever brand you're using, then they're going to be over that price in any case. So this seems like the best of both worlds, but we don't really have any sort of major, sort of financial hit for that convenience. Now, if I was just doing a regular studio, I would have basically two of the Amaran Verge Max as my fill light and key light, and then actually the Amaran, regular Amaran, which is a smaller flat panel, having that for my my rear light, because it means you're all in the Amaran ecosystem. You've got a Stream Deck button, so if you want to turn them on and off, I can just basically press a button and it's going to come on and off. And so you could then have your rear light, your backlight, also on that as well. So with the touch of a Stream Deck button, basically everything comes on. So that is lighting, and I highly recommend the Amaran Verge Max. You'll find links to these down in the description, by the way, and I will just drop the links into the chat in case anybody is interested. I've got them already because I dropped them into the Zoom chat just not long ago. So let me drop those in. Those are the lights I'm using. I will make a full video on the Amaran Verge Max because it is a great light, and also I can run through some of the settings on the Stream Deck app for that and how to set all that up. So that is lighting. So let's take a look then at some audio that's going on. And basically, my audio setup hasn't changed in a long time, but it is one of the things that's worth getting right. And once again, as I mentioned at the start, you don't have to have all of these things set up to actually start using. Oh, sorry, just let me come to this question. I missed that. Sorry. Hey, Jennifer, what constant light do you use at what power? So actually the nanlights that I've got, technically they're 60 watts, but you can have a setting on them where the fan doesn't come on, but it limits it to 30 watts. Now I've got, effectively with that setting on, I've got my key light at 100%. So that means 30 watts, and my fill light is around about 70 or 80% of that. So it's about say 3/4 or 4/5 the amount of the fill light. So this one definitely is brighter than this one. So the fill light is slightly lower than the key light. Now, if I was using the Amaran Verge Max, I'd probably replicate that. So I'd have my Amaran at about 30%, something like that, because that is also 60 watt, although it's a flat panel, but it's still 60 watt in power. So that's what I've got. Now, when it comes to the lighting, it's also going to depend, though, on the particular camera you've got and how sensitive it is to light. So the one factor that is specifically the light sensitivity factor of the camera, actually there's technically three things that affect the amount of light that's reaching the sensor. There is the shutter speed, there is the aperture, so that's the size of the opening in the camera that's letting the light through, if you imagine a physical lens. But then there is the ISO, which is the light sensitivity factor of the lens. Now, when you think about all three of those things, the shutter speed is pretty much there's a rule of thumb of, whatever you've got your frames per second set at, let's say mine is 30 frames per second, then you set your shutter speed to 1 over double that. So the shutter speed in my case is set to 1 over 60, which means 1/60th of a second for the shutter speed of the camera. So if you set that one manually based on the frame rates that you've got set, and then the other factor affecting the light reaching the sensor is going to be the aperture. So that's basically the size of the opening in the lens, the physical lens that's letting the light through. Now, with that one, there is this interesting thing that happens, which is the larger the aperture, the larger the diameter of the hole that's letting the light through, then obviously the brighter the image, but it also gives this other effect known as bokeh, which is this slightly blurry background. So that is actually quite a desirable thing in terms of, in these sorts of setups, because I do actually want that soft focus on the background whilst I remain in focus. And actually that's a reason why some people buy specific lenses, because some of the higher end lenses have and it's really annoying that the number is smaller, but it means a larger aperture. So this is the F number. So for example, this camera that I've got, the Sony ZV-E10 with a Sigma 30mm lens, the aperture on that is 1.4. So it's f1.4. You might have something which has got a smaller aperture, which might be 2.8 or whatever it happens to be. But the larger the size, actually, the better it is for us, because it's going to give us that good effect. It's also going to give us more light into the camera as well. So we're setting that basically as low as it will go to give us that nicer effect on the back, and also knock-on effect of giving us more light into the sensor. So then the final thing that adjusts the light sensitivity is this factor called the ISO, the light sensitivity factor. And that is something which, if you have it higher, it's going to be more sensitive to light, and so the image is going to be brighter. But it also does introduce more noise into the image, so it's going to be more grainy. The higher the sensitivity, the more grainy and lower quality, effectively, the image is going to be. So if we've set our shutter speed, because it's kind of dictated by our frames per second, and 30 frames per second is a pretty standard rate there. And then if we've set our aperture, because we've just made it as big as possible, the widest opening to let as much light in as possible, because it's going to give us that soft focus, then the two other ways that we can control light are either this ISO and then with our actual physical lights. So what I would always recommend is, like, you start with putting the ISO as low as it will go effectively, because that's going to have the least distorted, the least noisy image, and then add more light in order to make your image on screen look as bright as it can. Now, there may be some limitations around that, with the light. So if your light will only go so bright, then you may have to then crank the ISO up a little bit to correct for it. But if you use that as a starting point, that's going to ideally give you the highest quality. Some people might think, well, I'll put the ISO up really high and then I can have my lights low so that they're not so bright. But the trade-off then is you're getting this slightly noisy image. So yeah, that would be the correct thing. And absolutely, Jennifer, the depth of field, that is the thing which we talk about with what's in focus and what isn't in the background. So cool. Yeah, that is that's where I have these set. So long answer to the question is basically 30 watts for my key light and about 25 watts for my fill light is what they're at the moment. And in the Zoom backstage, Daryl's just ordered his lights. We were talking about this backstage. So let's go on to audio then, because audio is, as I say, it's something that has pretty much been unchanged in my setup for quite some time. And I'm using the Rodecaster Pro 2, and then I'm using the Rode PodMic USB. Now, what I'll say is I did start off with using the Shure MV7, and the reason why I used that and why I bought that at the time was because it had a dual connection at the back. So it had both the XLR but also the USB as well. So it meant you could either run it. XLR is just kind of like that standard microphone cable. So whenever you see, performers or stand-up comedians, whatever, they've got a cable attached to the microphone. It's going to be an XLR cable invariably that is connected to it, and that's just a standard cable used to connect a microphone to an external audio interface. But you can also connect microphones directly to your computer. And so one of the things that I bought the MV7 for specifically was because it had both of those things. Now, a little bit later, Rode brought out a microphone as well that had dual XLR and USB-C so that you can connect it to your computer either of those ways. And the reason why I've got this one is because Rode sent it for me for review, and I've just plugged it in and been using it ever since. I've got my MV7 on a setup downstairs in another studio. But basically, either of these are really good options if you want something that you can just start with and plug into your computer. But then later, if ever you do add in an audio interface like a Rodecaster or something else, then the microphone can grow with you. And I absolutely would still be just using my MV7 had I not been sent this one, because it's also a great microphone. But nevertheless, that is what I am using. I've got the Rode PodMic USB, and it is going into the Rodecaster. Now, what does the Rodecaster give you? Well, a few things really for me specifically is it allows me to do some slightly different audio routing. So I've got my microphone going in here, and at the moment I'm not really using a lot of this for this particular live stream, but it allows me to control the audio from my live production software, Ecamm Live, but then also have a separate channel going into Zoom, for example, and have separate sort of communication channels going into there. When I run my event, the Digital Stage Summit, which I did last year and we're doing again in March, in that case, we've got, 3 different things going on. I want the production, but then also the Zoom backstage and also the speakers channel. So it allows me to control the audio on various different channels independently, physically. Now, you can do these things in software, but there's something very nice to be able to have, tactile buttons in front of you that I can see and touch and feel and, make adjustments to. I like having certain things in hardware rather than in software. Now, these buttons on the side here, they control things like sound effects. If I want to play any of those in, don't tend to have too much of that going on, but what I can do is set up things for like pressing a button and it will set up a back channel between me and the speakers in the event, for example, while it doesn't interrupt the broadcast and so on. So there's a lot of things you can do with the Rodecaster Pro 2. Also the Rodecaster Duo, if you are looking at either of those two, there's a bit of a misnaming, I think, because one of them's got the word Pro in it and the other one doesn't. Really what Pro means is, in this case, you've basically got 4 microphone inputs, whereas the Rodecaster Duo only has 2. But in actual fact, I think the Pro features of the Rodecaster are more like the advanced audio routing and the processing that you can add to your microphones. And so really for me, the Duo is every bit as much a Pro as the Rodecaster Pro 2. It's just that you've got 2 mics instead of 4. Well, if you're just a solo creator, you don't need 4 mic inputs in any way likely. So yeah. There is that. But the other thing that it allows you to do is, adjust some of the processing on your mic. So, for example, one of the things I have on here, which I find useful, is what's called a noise gate. And I've got an air conditioning unit running. And basically, I want it to be that if I stop talking, there is complete silence on the stream or in the Zoom call or whatever. And the reason why that it goes completely silent is because I have my noise gate set to basically completely close when I stop speaking. So think of it as a physical gate that's opening and closing. And when it detects that I'm talking above a certain level or detects noise above a certain level, i.e. my voice, then it lets the audio through. And when I stop talking, then it's going to close it again. Now, the fact is I've got this air conditioning unit running above my head. And if I didn't have the noise gate, when I stopped talking, you would really notice that sound. It is there all the time that I'm speaking as well, and if you kind of listen carefully, you might hear it in the background, but because I'm talking, naturally we as humans are focused on the human voice rather than slight background distractions, and so you don't notice it much, but you would notice it more, as I say, if I didn't have the noise gate on. every time I take a breath, it'd just be present there in the background. So that's another reason to use that, as well as some other audio processing. I won't do a complete audio processing live stream. I've done a few of those already, and I've got some resources around that as well. But that's what the Rodecaster is for. It's for audio routing and handling my audio. Now, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that everyone go out and buy a Rodecaster, because one of the things is that the audio is really the most tricky thing out of everything in terms of video. Once you've got the lighting set up, it's kind of done, and you switch them on and they're on, and you can clearly see that they're on and they're working. If my lights are off, I know that they're off because I'm in the dark. Kind of the same with my camera as well. Once I've got my cameras connected, I'm looking at myself, and either it's working or it's not, and I can usually clearly see that it's working or it's not. With audio, though, it's a little bit more abstract, and sometimes what we're hearing is not what everyone else is hearing. In Zoom calls, for example, you could be in a situation where you're busy talking away, playing music and things like that as part of your live workshop or event or something, and then it's only after the fact that somebody mentions like, oh, I didn't know there was supposed to be music, because they weren't hearing it. And also the other thing about audio is there are so many ways that we can cause the same issues, or that the same issues can arise. For example, you're recording something and there's a slight echo feeding back into the production or into the Zoom or something like that. And there are multiple different ways that this can happen. Now, I love my Rodecaster, and it's a great addition to my studio for the sorts of things that I want to do, but it can add, multiple layers of complexity and multiple other failure points. So I certainly know people who have even started with a Rodecaster and then figured, you know what, I think I'll just get like the pod mic, which has all the onboard processing anyway. So all the audio processing that you can do with a Rodecaster, not all of it, but most of it you can actually do with this over USB, and then just remove the Rodecaster from the equation because it's not necessary for what you're doing. So once again, it isn't like this is an essential bit of studio gear that everybody needs for their video production, but I like it and it does a lot of good things for me. But just beware that more options means more potential failure points. Hey Randall, great to see you as well. How are you connecting the OBSBot Tiny 2 cameras from so far away from the desk? So they are plugged in. I've got basically this one over here, and my other one, let me just take this back for a second. I'll get my other one back on track because it looked like it had moved position. I'll get my PTZ controls up for this, and then hopefully I should be able to just put it back to position number one. Let's try. There we go. So there's this one and then this one. This is running, basically I've got a 5-meter USB cable for this one. Manufacturers will always say you've got to use the cable that comes with the product, and you've also got to plug it directly into your computer. They do this to basically save their back or save them support calls, because if you've got a USB-C cable, it might have the same USB-C connector on either end and look exactly the same as another cable, but they're not all the same. So they've got different ratings. Some of them even don't pass data. They're only for power. Other ones can pass data, but they're limited to the amount of data that can go over them. I, at one point, just bought a load of long cables, and they're all rated to 50 megabits per second. So that means that I can power my teleprompter. This is another thing, the Elgato prompter. That was one thing where they say, oh, it's got to be on the cable that came with it, and it's got to be plugged into the computer. Well, if you've got a 20 megabits per second then cable, then that's more than enough to power it. And this one, as I say, even on this, is basically 5 meters long. So I've got a 5-meter cable on this that's going all the way back around my desk into everywhere. And then even then, it's not going into my computer, it's going into a powered hub. So that's the other thing, is making sure you've got a hub or a dock that has adequate power to power these devices as well. So the OBSBot, and that brings us on to cameras, the cameras I'm using. I've got my main camera I've already mentioned, which is my Sony ZV-E10. With a Sigma 30mm lens. The 30mm is related to the field of view, not to be confused with depth of field is what's in focus, but the field of view is like how narrow an angle it is. So if you think about like a really wide shot, that's got a really wide field of view, and it's basically capturing a load of the surroundings. But imagine when you take a zoom lens and zoom in, what you're effectively doing is you're narrowing the field of view, so you're just zooming into something, a small fraction of that. So that's the field of view. So that is dictated by the focal length of the lens. So if you imagine you've got your sensor and you've got a point, which is the focal length, if we have that really close to the center, basically it's going to be really sort of wide open. But if we put that focal length really far away from the sensor, or the focal point, I should say, then imagine that that is then having an effect of narrowing it. So when you look at lenses and you've got a 60mm lens, 30mm lens, 100mm. What that is the distance between the actual focal length within the lens assembly, or the effective focal length, and the sensor itself. So the larger that number, basically the narrower the field of view it's going to be. And so that's why it's always a bit tricky when you see people like in certain forums like the Ecamm Live community, where somebody says, what lens should I get for my Sony ZV-E10 or whatever the camera is, and people would jump in immediately with a suggestion of, oh, get this lens or that lens. You've got to really know what you want to do with it and what you want to have in shot. There is a common pairing of people will jump in and say, this a really popular vlogging camera was always the ZV-E10 with the Sigma 16. And why the Sigma? Well, it was just a slightly lower cost but still high quality range of lenses than just buying the Sony lens of the same focal length. It's also got a good, gives a good depth of field because the aperture is relatively small, so 1.4, whatever it is. But then the other thing about it is, why do people immediately recommend the 16? Well, actually a couple of reasons. So first of all, vloggers would use it when they're literally got some sort of attachment like this. But imagine you've got the Sony on here and you've got the lens. Well, the lens is basically only at arm's length away from your face. So you need that wide field of view that you get with the 16mm lens, because then it gets you in the shot. Or the other way that is slightly similar to that is if you're using it as we're using here with a desk. If you've got it on your desk and it's literally just an arm's length away, then the 16mm is still going to give you that sort of slightly wide angle so that you're still in shot. Now, in my case, because I've got a bit more space and my lens is basically like 2 arms lengths away. So I'm not even, reaching close to my teleprompter here. So that's an arm's length. And actually my lens inside the teleprompter is basically like at least the same length again. So I'm sort of 2 arms lengths away. And also, I've got quite a deep room here as well. So I wanted to get something that was basically cropping into that back wall a little bit more effectively. And if I'd used a 16mm lens, it would have been really massively wide shot here and wouldn't be what I was looking for. So the side of lens that you are, the type of lens that you're getting is going to, if you're buying separate lenses, that is, rather than just, something like the OBSBot, which is, okay, you just zoom in or zoom out. But if you are buying a prime lens, as in a lens that's got a fixed focal length, you just need to be aware of that and not necessarily immediately jump into somebody else's recommendation because that works for them. Your setup might not be the same. So that is the slight digression, but this is what I'm using, the Sigma 30mm lens on the Sony ZV-E10. I will also say that I've had this for about 4 years now, and it's just sat behind my teleprompter. Things have changed slightly. I've moved studios, I've switched out the teleprompter, but apart from those things, it's basically just been on permanently for those 4 years. It's always just switched on. I come into my studio, give my mouse a little wiggle to wake up my my Mac, and then I'm just ready to go. I do use a dummy battery with it, so it's powered via that rather than powered via USB. It's got a dummy battery in the bottom of it, and that's sort of plugged permanently in. And then it's coming into my computer via a capture card. So that is something called a Camlink, which takes the HDMI. I thought I'd got one just around here somewhere, but it basically takes the HDMI signal and converts it into USB. And so when I plug that into the computer, that then just appears as a USB camera. So that's my sort of primary camera. And then when we look at these other cameras behind, this one is called the OBSBot Tiny 2 Lite. It's a little PTZ camera, or pan tilt zoom. And then on the other side, I've got, another one, which is the OBSBot Tiny 2. Now, just to show you what those look like, that's it. It is a little tiny camera, but it's PTZ, which means pan tilt zoom, and that whole head assembly basically moves around, so I can change sort of where it's pointing and adjust the position of it and so on. And then obviously you can just sort of manually zoom. I do have another OBSBot though in the studio, which is this one for this shot, which is a sort of top-down camera. And for that one, I'm using this little guy. It's called the OBSBot Meet 2, and that is just a 4K camera. It's completely fixed. The size of it, it's always difficult to see sizes of things on YouTube videos, I find. You know, sometimes I'll see people's reviews and then I get the thing and it's always smaller than I imagine. But that, the OBSBot Meet 2 this is an iPhone 16, and it's about the size of the camera assembly there. So just that sort of empty part in that where this side, it's about the size of that, maybe slightly longer, but basically no taller than that. That's the size of it. So those are basically 3 OBSBots that I've got for the top down and those 2 side shots. I do use another one in my studio downstairs, the Meet 2, which is a much bigger PTZ camera that's got much bigger, greater capabilities in terms of connectivity and things like that. And yes, it's got a bigger sensor and an optical zoom and so on. But what I find with the OBSBot range is that when you are looking at the different sort of prices, the Meet 2 is less than $100. The Tiny 2 is light is around about 100 and something, and the Tiny 2 is around about 200 and something, I think. But when you look at those sort of step ups in price, they're still all giving, you know, pretty decent quality, and what you're generally paying for is more functions. So this one, the top down camera, is just fixed, is not moving anywhere, whereas those other 2 that I've got over my shoulders are basically, you know, they've got the PTZ, they've got the moving parts. Then when you look at something like the Tail Air, which is this one, which isn't hooked up to anything at the moment. Well, this one is also PTZ. It's considerably larger than the Meet 2, but it has more connectivity. So it can be connected over NDI, it can be connected over USB or HDMI, and it's got a built-in battery, so there's just more connection options. So really, when you look at the range, you're paying for like the extra options effectively. And if you don't need all of those features, then you don't need to think, well, I've got to suddenly go to the higher end camera. And certainly when you compare the cost of those to, you know, the Sony ZV-E10, for example, with the prime lens, that at the time that I bought it was around about $700 for the body, I think, something like that, and then maybe another $250 for the lens. So you're looking at close to $1,000 for this camera. Well, you know, you can get some really decent sort of, I'm going to call them webcams. I mean, ones that plug in remotely, or I suppose we could call them like dedicated streaming or content creation cameras, because obviously the Sony ZV-E10 is a photographic camera that does video, whereas these are just sort of exclusively video. So the cost on the barrier to entry to getting good quality images now has come down considerably. The other camera that I've got in here, which is sort of over my other shoulder, is actually this one, and this is the Sony ZV-1, and I'll just show you where this is. So this is in this teleprompter, and it's just basically hidden under the little hood of the teleprompter there. So that is the ZV-1 in behind that, and that has a fixed lens on it. Oh, sorry, a built-in lens, I should say. It's got a zoom lens, but it's not a lens that has sort of a full lens assembly on the front of it. It's kind of built into the body effectively, and that's why on this teleprompter I'm using this hood, because there is no sort of attachment to the front of it. And that brings me on to teleprompters, and why I've got this on a rolling stand, by the way, is because it gives me another whole sort of shot. I can move that around, but then I can sort of go over to this shot, and there is some, I'm going to be using this sort of set behind me, if you like, slightly cropped in and positioned properly. But that's going to be for some other like vertical content that's just going to be purely done with this camera. But the teleprompter, though, the Elgato prompter, one of the things that was great about it when it came out is the fact that it was an all-in-one device. So you've got the lens assembly, sorry, you've got the monitor itself, and then the place to position your camera behind the glass in there. And just to show you the way that teleprompters work, in case you haven't seen them before, is the teleprompter consists of a screen here. You've got some glass there, and then the camera is in behind it. And you may or may not be able to see the camera front of the lens, just slightly showing up through the front of that there. But the point is, when you look into it, what you're actually seeing is you're seeing the content from the screen. Now, traditionally, these have been used for, you would have scrolling text down there, and that would then scroll up on the screen. So it means that you could use it as an actual teleprompter where you're reading a script while still looking into the lens. I don't really use scripts, so what I'm using it for, which is a really great way to, first of all, see your output. So at the moment, you're kind of seeing the same thing as you're seeing, repeated. But normally, if I was just recording a regular video, then I'm going to see something that looks like this. You can see in here, I'm seeing basically what you see on the screen. So it's a way of having that confidence. Some people call it a confidence monitor, that what you're putting out is what you intend. So no more kind of switching and sharing things and then realizing, oh, I'm in the wrong scene and I'm not showing the correct thing. But the other way that it's really useful is for in Zoom meetings and workshops and so on, where you can have the other Zoom participants in there, and that allows you to maintain that eye contact. So while you are looking into this, imagine that the person you're speaking to is in there. It gives that effect of you're speaking face to face. You get to see them face to face as you're, looking into the camera. But the effect that they have, even if they're not looking at their camera, they're looking maybe down at the Zoom window, they're going to see that you're looking at them basically. And it really makes a huge difference in communication. And it's something that I find gets commented on, for me at least, in Zoom sessions when people don't know what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. Some people will say, like, where are you looking? It looks like you're looking right at me. And the truth is, I actually am looking at them. So that is the Elgato prompter. And as I say, when it first came out, the beauty of this was it was all in one. So you didn't have to, what we used to have to do previously was you buy a prompter and then you have to find a monitor that's going to match it, or find a way to hack an iPad to use in there. But it was always a little bit of a explaining process to go through. Whereas this one, you basically just buy it as an all-in-one device, monitor and this together. And then when you plug the cable into the computer, the other issue that you sometimes run into with teleprompters is when you have a situation where the computer is already up to its like maximum number of allowable monitors. So for example, you've got a Mac Mini that can only run 2 monitors and you've already got 2. And then you go to buy a teleprompter with some extra monitor, third-party monitor. And then your computer is basically like, no, we can't actually run it. So you've got to then buy a separate dock, which has this other technology built in called Display Link, which allows you to run additional monitors. I mean, technically what I'm running now on my computer, I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 monitors on here. And yet technically my Mac Mini Pro that is running it all, which is just down there somewhere, that can only drive 2 monitors. Well, the reason I can do it is because I've got this thing underneath here somewhere, which probably you won't be able to see, just sort of slightly out of view there. Is this dock, which is a Display Link dock, and that allows me to run an additional 4 monitors. But what Elgato did, which was a really smart move, was because they didn't want people to run into this sort of issue, they built in the Display Link software into, or the Display Link technology, I should say, into their hardware, so that when you install the Elgato prompter software, it also installs Display Link. So they really did make something that was kind of plug and play. And there was a huge amount of hype when the prompter came out, which was, oh, this is amazing. This is the best thing, the best new product of the year or whatever. But what I found was a lot of the people who were making those comments were people who just basically never used a teleprompter before. And so what they were really discovering was the amazing power of teleprompters as, creation tools and Zoom tools and whatever. One of the things that I felt was a bit of a limitation with this was its size, because it's only a 9-inch screen. So I never really got to replace my previous teleprompter, which was 12.5 inches, because this always just felt like a real step down. When you've got it in front of you and you're wanting to use it for your Zoom calls and things like that, the text on screen or the buttons are going to be a lot smaller. And for me, it just felt like a step down, although it was a great product. And I said at the time, I'm just waiting till they bring out the Elgato Prompter XL, because that's obviously the naming convention that they've got for their Stream Decks, the Stream Deck and the Stream Deck XL. Well, that is what they came out with, and they did stick to their naming convention. So that's what I am now using now, which is, here, the Elgato Prompter XL. Now, in this case, I've got my Sony ZV-E10 behind it, but there is a system that they've got where you basically, if you've got a camera with I'm going to say a proper lens on it, like a physical lens, you have this concept of filters that you can screw onto the front. And so what this comes with is basically a sort of ring system that you can screw on a ring onto the front. Sorry, this is too dark. I'm not going to be able to show you. Somewhere behind there is a camera. But you screw basically the ring onto the front of your camera, and then that then slots directly into the back of the prompter. So it's all completely enclosed. There's no sort of hood on the back of it, as I've had to use in this one, which just helps with sealing the light in and just makes it a little bit neater. Now, there was an issue though with the Prompter XL, more so than this one. It did occur with this one, but it occurred more so with the Prompter XL, which was when you've got it at just regular brightness, and it didn't happen for everyone, but for a lot of people, there was this weird like haziness that you would get across the bottom of the image. And it wasn't haziness in the monitor itself. It was coming through from basically the way that the light was reflecting through the glass effectively. And I've got to say, it's something that I just never had at all with my other teleprompter. So it isn't like a thing that's common with all teleprompters. And I put it down to the fact that maybe it was their choice of the glass that they'd used or whatever, some of the optical properties of it. But whatever the case was, there was this like really, intrusive sort of hazing that was coming through into your video, basically. And so the solution was, well, we can turn the brightness down on the monitor and that would reduce it to a large extent, but actually it didn't completely solve it at all. And then you were left with a monitor that was kind of low brightness. Now, what you can do though, and what I've done with my camera, thanks to Neil Faramond, who's a great another creator, and it was his suggestion, was to use a filter, so a polarizing filter on the front of the lens first before the ring went on to go into the prompter itself. And what a polarizing filter does is basically it sort of cuts out light that's coming in from a particular angle. Now, the way that this is used in photography is, let's say you're like shooting water and you want to capture the fish swimming in the water. Well, normally you take a picture of the surface and you're going to get all the reflection and the glare coming back off from the from the sun or wherever you are. Or the same if you're shooting through windows, for example, you're going to get these reflections. Well, what a polarizing filter does is basically effectively stop light that's coming in from a certain direction. That's in essence what it's doing. And so by having this polarizing filter on the front, you can kind of turn it round to affect which direction it's stopping the light coming in from. And once you turn it round to the point where it's effectively stopping the light that's coming from these reflections that you're getting in the screen, it completely solves the problem, like completely. So that's what I've got on my camera now. And in my review video of the prompter, I mentioned that there was this thing and you could correct it by turning the brightness down. But yeah, it was thanks to Neil that I got one of these filters and put it on, and that did completely solve the problem. So I'll at some point make another quick video about that to share out as another public service announcement for those that haven't caught Neil's stuff. But yeah, that solves the problem. But this now is a back to the the gear I'm using. This is a let me think. Is it 14.6 or 14.6 inch? I think is the size of the Prompter XL, and that's actually now bigger than my original prompter. And one thing that is particularly satisfying is I always had this additional monitor down here, and now that's basically the same size as the prompter. So it's always nice when those things are basically the same size. The way that I use this then is if I'm making a video like this, I've effectively got my eCam output in the window over there, and so I can see everything that you see. If I'm on a Zoom workshop, for example, I will have the Zoom active speaker, which shows me my output in the teleprompter, and then I'll have the Zoom gallery down below. And then whenever we go to like a Q&A in the Zoom, in any case, I'm going to go to something like this, which is me and the guest that I'm bringing up onto screen. And so I'd be effectively looking at me and them in the teleprompter, just what you're seeing now. And so I've still got that eye contact with the person that I'm actually speaking to. But during the sessions, though, I'm when I'm presenting, I'm still seeing my output on the screen there. Now, if I'm doing a Zoom coaching call or a Zoom consultation or something like that, then I kind of flip those around and I have the main Zoom window up in there. So that's where I'm seeing the other participant and then we're getting that sort of eye contact. And then down below, we have the secondary Zoom window. And so that means that when they share their screen or something like that, then they are going to go full screen. Sorry, that is going to go into that window down below. By the way, the other camera that I've got in here is the Osmo Pocket. This is, I don't really use this for content creation as such, apart from in the studio. It's more kind of like the camera that I have at home when we're doing stuff with the family or whatever. It really just sort of fits in the pocket. That's how big the actual camera itself is. This is an extension, sort of an extra battery. And then this is a Ulanzi tripod, which is really good because you can kind of hold it like that. One of the things about the Osmo Pocket is, you know, it is tiny, and actually sometimes if I'm out with the kids or whatever, or you know, whatever we're doing, sometimes it's good to have it at this angle so that I can kind of hold it down here, but it still be pointing out. But one of the things I like about this Ulanzi tripod is there's a little sort of switch on the top, and when I press that, the arms, or the legs I should say, just fold out. So it's great for if you're kind of like holding it around and then you want to quickly put it down because one of your kids has fallen in the mud or whatever happens to them, or they've started fighting with each other, then you can just flick the arms out and then just sort of set it down. But it also works really well in the studio to just have it on the desk like that. It does require, in order to take it into eCam, so by the way, this is this camera, this is this kind of like mobile camera that I've been using, but this does require an HDMI, sorry, a USB to go into the computer, but as soon as you connect it over USB into the computer, it basically just shows up as another camera. So that's basically how I use this one, as a little extra mobile camera. But that is my my teleprompters and the setup of those monitors. What I then also have is, as for additional monitors, is I've got my sort of main working monitor, which is also my screen share monitor. So if I wanted to share with you, you know, something that was on that particular window, then I've got a scene set up in eCam which shares just that particular portion of the screen and just that particular window, just like that. So that is kind of what I use for all of my content. If I'm doing presentations, then I'll have Keynote or PowerPoint or whatever, that would be open on this screen as well. And basically I've got space there to put, you know, a number of things that I might want to queue up for the session. And then I've also got this monitor, which is kind of like I always think of it as my productivity or communications monitor. That's normally going to have my sort of calendar, WhatsApp and email or whatever, if I'm in that sort of mode of working. But generally, kind of, this is my working desk. Is I move my chair over here, and it's my main monitor, an extra monitor. But then when I'm filming, I kind of swing around to this side of the desk. So the desk is kind of like a bit of a dog leg shape. So I'm in front of this one here, and then that's just where you know, the content that I'm sharing. Now, what I also have is this monitor, which is actually a touchscreen monitor. Now, this is great for controlling eCam. So these are basically all of my eCam controls you can see down here. And this allows me to, because it's touchscreen, I can sort of scroll up through the chat. If I want to put chat messages onto the screen, I can just tap the message and it's going to pop up on the screen just like that. And I can take it down again. So it's a good way to sort of navigate through the controls. It's also good specifically with Zoom because when I'm running Zoom sessions, I may want to just sort of tap on that and, you know, adjust some of the settings in the Zoom session without having to necessarily think, you know, where's my mouse, and come over and find the right thing to click on. It's much more intuitive to do that with touch. Again, complete overkill potentially just for recording videos and live streaming. I originally bought this for my studio downstairs, which is a sort of standing studio, more like a physical stage, and it's all operated with Stream Deck pedals under my feet, but I wanted to be able to control the Zoom and that with that, and so that's where I was using the touchscreen for that. I did a full video about this though. It's the Dell P2424 something T, HT I think, standing for touch. And yeah, it's not a new monitor by any stretch. I think it's been out for a couple of years now, but it's certainly new to me in the past, I guess, 6 months or so. And yeah, I'm really loving being able to just control things with touch because we're so accustomed to it now. And having it here just on in the front of me means that it becomes part of my sort of mission control really for the live stream and everything like that. Now, speaking of mission control, let me just come back to the chat first, actually. Let's see where I'm up to. So first of all, how are you connecting the? Oh, so that was the Tiny 2 was connected over USB. The Tail Air can be NDI, but are you converting UVC to NDI or running long USB-C cables? So the Tail Air, yeah, generally I'm using that with. There is a converter that you get for it, and it comes out from it plugs into the USB-C connector. And then it's got like a hardware a dongle, if you like, that converts that into Ethernet. And so you can run it over Ethernet cable there. Now with the Tail 2, that one I'm just plugging, and that's again my studio downstairs. That one is also power over Ethernet. So that means that my Tail 2 downstairs, which is this one's sort of bigger brother, sister, or whatever, that one has just only got Ethernet going into it, which is providing the hardwired Ethernet, the hardwired NDI, but it's also giving the power, so I don't have to have a separate power source plugged into it. Now, actually, speaking of NDI and running things over long distances, this camera here, which is the Sony ZV-1, what I've been testing with that, and actually this one normally is just over a very long USB-C cable, but for my studio downstairs, I have got other cameras that are in different places, and so what I've got is this thing here. If I'm going to just bring it in, and it's called a Zoe box from Zoe Tech, ZOWIE. And what this does is it takes an HDMI signal in. If I just cover my eyes, it will come into focus. It takes an HDMI signal in, and then there's Ethernet connected here as well, and power. And it basically converts any HDMI, or you can plug USB into it as well, and it will convert that into NDI. So if you have got cameras and you've got this issue with potentially long cables, and you want to have things like at the back of your studio, I wouldn't, for example, I mean, I think the 5-meter cables that I've got are probably at the limit of what I want to run over USB, to be honest, and they're only running these little things. But the Zoe box is really cool because, as I say, what that gives you is the ability to take any camera, whether it's USB or HDMI, plug it into this little guy, and then have this one plugged into Ethernet, and then Ethernet can obviously run much longer distances. And so yeah, this is specifically, I got this to test it out, and then I'm getting another 3 basically for more cameras in my studio downstairs. So then they all just basically become NDI cameras. Now there's another little advantage to this as well, which is over, let's say you've got 5 or 6 cameras, or 3 or 4 even, and you want to bring those into your computer. So I'm talking about HDMI cameras, and you want to bring them into your computer. Well, the way that people do it at the moment is one of 2 ways, really. Well, I suppose there are more, but let's say 2. Either they're using capture cards on each individual camera, and so that might be like a Camlink 4K, something like that, to take, one for each camera, and then they're bringing those into a hub or a dock or whatever to get them into their computer, so they've got 4 individual cameras showing up. The slight drawback with that is the computer doesn't recognize the cam links as individual unique devices, shall we say. And so what can happen sometimes is you switch on your computer, you're using Ecamm Live or OBS or whatever, and you assign those different cameras to your different scenes, to your different layouts, whatever. And then you switch your computer off, and then you switch it back on again. And then suddenly the cameras have all switched around because the computer has just assigned these things to them and it doesn't know which is which. Now, technically, I think if you plug them into like different hubs or different docks, it's going to pick up on that, and so that will make them a little bit more persistent. But either way, it's not the best way of bringing them in. And also bringing in video over USB. What you'll see certainly on the Mac, if you look at your system, what do they call it now? Activity monitor, and it'll tell you how much RAM you're using, how much processor, and so on, and it'll tell you which processes are using that processing power. One of the ones you're going to see on there is the UVC controller, Universal Video Controller. It must be something else, but it's basically, if you see something that's UVC something, then that is the process of video over USB, and it can be quite processor intensive, especially if you start connecting lots of cameras to it. So one solution that I've been recommending for a long time was Blackmagic, who make the 8M range of hardware camera switches. They also make this thing called the Decklink Quad 4K, and basically it's a card, so an external card that has 4 HDMI connectors to it, but then you can put that into some sort of external enclosure and then have that connected to your computer via Thunderbolt, and it's basically one connection into your computer, but it gives you 4 unique video inputs. The trouble with it is it's a bit expensive, or a bit not expensive, that's the wrong word, it's a bit costly. So it's around about, I think, 500 and 600, something like that, for the actual card itself, and then you've got to buy the enclosure, so you're looking at kind of like around $800 just to get those 4 cameras in and have the convenience of individually named cameras and only one sort of connection into your computer. This actually could well be a better solution, because this is around about $160, and it would mean that you wouldn't be bringing the cameras in over USB, so you could just have 4 of these and then be connecting your individual individual HDMI cameras over USB. And I'll drop this into the chat as well for those that haven't seen it. It's the Zoe box. Zoe box. And yeah, this would be a way of doing that and getting those things in. So at the moment, technically, this camera here, I'll move it out of the way. This camera is coming in via this Zoe box, and you can rename them and everything like that as well. So, so yeah, if you've got it in your Amazon cart at the moment or in your wish list, yeah, it's a great addition to the studio. So let me get back to the comments. You've got the same Rodecaster Pro and Shure mic setup with a Sony full frame 14mm lens that I also use for photography as my prime. Do you use OBS Studio, and if so, how? I don't use OBS. I did try OBS to begin with, because what I was looking for was this process of making videos in one take with no edits, and OBS is a great bit of cross-platform software available for the Mac and the PC. The other great thing about it is it's free, and it does allow you to do exactly the sorts of things I'm doing. So setting up these different scenes and being able to switch from one to the other, being able to switch to different camera angles and so on. So you can do all of that in OBS. So it stands for Open Broadcast Software. I just found that for me personally, it didn't kind of work the way my brain worked. I can't describe it, but it just felt like there was something about it where I often find as well with cross-platform software that works on Mac and PC. Sometimes it doesn't feel necessarily, and I'm not saying this is a selling point for everybody, but it doesn't feel Mac-like. There was something about it that just didn't really work the way that I've come to expect things to work. And then I discovered this other software called Ecamm Live, and Ecamm Live is basically, think of it a bit like OBS, but it's a Mac-only software. And for me, I just found it a lot more intuitive, a lot more easy to use. And yeah, I switched at that point from OBS to Ecamm. Ecamm is paid software, and there are two tiers to the price. I should drop a link into to Ecamm. You can get 15% off, obviously, with my affiliate link. Where would it be without affiliate links? But this is Ecamm, and yeah, there's a regular tier which I think is it about $30 a month, and then a pro tier which is $40 a month. And the pro tier also gives you this thing called the virtual camera, and actually it's fully integrated with Zoom as well. So what Ecamm does that OBS doesn't do natively is that Ecamm, I can set up a scene like this, and if I was on a Zoom call with somebody, I could just pull them straight into here, into my production, which is kind of like a game changer for recording podcasts. You know, if you just want to run the thing on Ecamm and then just bring the other guest in here. This particular scene is actually set up for me when I do my workshops. So when we have, I deliver some content and then we have a Q&A. When people ask questions, they just pop into that spot, which means that the replay value of the workshops is so much better as well. I should also say, although I've just finished running a 2-week training on Ecamm, which was a paid course, I do also have a completely free course on Ecamm, which is a kind of on-demand thing called the Ecamm Live Masterclass. And if you're curious about Ecamm, then maybe even before you sign up to Ecamm, just jump into the Ecamm Live Masterclass and go and watch the quick start guide at the beginning. It's basically like 13 short, 5-minute lessons, something like that. And it's going to take you step by step through like how you actually do stuff in Ecamm. But I'll just give you a little taste of it because it is so simple to do. So what I'll do is I'll just share my entire screen with you and show you what I've got on down here. So I'm now sharing my Ecamm interface. I've got the chat and various other things on here as well. But it's as simple as if I want to create a new scene that's maybe sharing my screen and got my camera in, I'm just clicking down here to create a new scene. We've got some stuff in the background, but let's just take that off for the time being. Whoops, take that off. So you're starting with a completely blank canvas, essentially, to start with. And then I can just say, right, I just want to add in a new camera. So I'll add in my camera. We can change the shape of it and make it, wherever we want to. So let's say I want to do a screen share with my camera on one side and the screen share on the other. Or maybe we want to do something with my camera here, and maybe if I just do Option Drag to create a new instance of the camera, and I can make that this size, and then I can click on the little pencil icon, and maybe actually what we want is rather than that, maybe we want my my top-down camera, which is, let me just check which one that is. That would be, and where's it gone now? Camera B. So if I just change that to camera B, now suddenly I've got a scene which is my camera and also my my top-down camera on it. Then maybe we might want one which is our screen share. So I could just duplicate that, take that out, add in a screen share, and now it sharing all of my my desktop. So this is that large monitor that I've got as my desktop, but I can hold down the option and just crop in to some area of that screen, just like this, and maybe even crop out the header from that that window there. And now let's align that with my camera over there and align it here. And then if I come out of demo mode, just like that, I've basically created a scene which is me and my my screen share. And then what we can do is add things like, you know, background images and so on. So basically just something like that. So the fact is, it is so easy and simple just to kind of create these scenes. And once you've created a few scenes, I talk about this all the time in certainly in the accelerator last week. Once you create you know, a couple of scenes for your camera, maybe a screen share, maybe another camera angle, something like that, it's just a case of the muscle memory that you get of switching between those. Actually, it becomes an extension of you and the value that you're trying to deliver. So if I'm talking about a screen share, I don't need to look down at my my instrument panel of my stream decks, my flight deck, to be able to just switch over to this scene that I want to share with you. Or if I want to go to the camera over there, I'm just instinctively pressing a button down on my stream deck, which is going to switch over to that. So yeah, it's very similar to OBS, but it is Ecamm that I'm using. But as I mentioned, it is a Mac only app. I always said at the moment, it will always be a Mac only app as far as I'm aware. There's no idea to make it PC as well. I'm assuming that you're using more than one powered dock to give the two prompters and multiple USB connected cameras. I am. So just a quick clarification as well, the difference between a dock and a hub. A dock is intended to give you like a connection into your computer and then multiple different types of connection out. So you think back to the old style of laptops. Do you remember when we had those like really clunky docking stations where you'd literally take the laptop and clunk it into the dock, and then the dock would be where you have all your additional peripherals attached, like your monitor, audio, internet, and all of those kind of things, Ethernet going into it. So a dock is specifically, you know, multiple different types of connections. And then a hub, on the other hand, is basically where you've got like one connection into your computer, giving you kind of more of the same out. So, for example, you know, the CalDigit Element hub that I've got is Thunderbolt into the computer, and then I've got 4 USB-C connections and 3 USB-A, but it's all the same kind of connector. There's no monitor, nothing else on it. So that's actually one of the ones I've got, is the CalDigit Element hub. And then for the dock that I'm using, because as we mentioned, I've got these extra monitors. Although the Elgato prompter has display link built into it, so you don't specifically need a specific type of dock for that. If you've got, you know, as long as it's a powered hub or dock, it will work. But because I have got these other monitors that are not, you know, Elgato monitors, then for that I'm using a Wavelink dock. So this is the one that I'm using. Down here, you can't see the connections on the back of it, but what I want to draw your attention to is that little symbol on it where it says display link. So if you're up to the limit of the number of monitors that you can connect to your computer and you want to add an extra in, this display link technology that's built into this dock is going to be what allows you to do that. And so, yeah, I've got a couple of these actually, one for a 2 monitor setup, and then this one can plug in essentially up to 4 monitors. So this one is by Wavelink, WAVLINK, and Display Link is the technology. There are other people who make these Display Link docks, like Pluggable is another one, but that is basically powering the monitors. Now I do also have another one, and again, this might be tricky to see. I have, whoops, I don't want to point at me or the the acoustic panel on the ceiling. Let me just switch this around the other way. There we go. Underneath there, you'll see there is those lights flashing, and that is a Rode USB hub. And what's good about that one is, what I always find is, it still seems that when you get these hubs, there still seems to be an emphasis on, like, you know, making it backwards compatible, I suppose. So we always seem to have lots of USB-A, and even on the back of the display link, that's got a couple of USB-C, but the USB-A, you know, the older style ones, whereas actually this Rode USB-C hub has just got lots of USB-C on it, so it's useful for that. So let me just find that for you. Essentially that where has it gone now? Let me just find this. The CalDigit TS, sorry, the CalDigit Element Hub, I should say. As I say, that's got 4 USB-C and 3 USB-A. The 3 USB-A are powering the 3 Stream Decks that are on my desk, which I'll talk about in a moment. And the USB-Cs are powering the Rodecaster Pro 2. I've got technically 2 channels can go into that. I've also got one of the prompters is going off that, and something else is coming off it as well. But this is the Rode one that I mentioned. I'll just grab the link to that as well. But like I say, it's got basically 6 USB-Cs on this side, and then is that the same side? That's the same side. It has got 1 USB-A, but mainly USB-C, and then there are a couple on the back as well, which has got a what do you call it, a card reader and so on as well, and then an extra Thunderbolt. So that is that is power, I should say, and then that is to connect to your computer. But we've got 6 USB-Cs. So if you're just looking for an expansion on your USB-Cs, then this would be an interesting one to look at. But the main thing you want to look at, though, in all of these cases, is what is the power delivery. And so here you can see that this is 60 watt. The CalDigit Element Hub is 90 watt, and I think the wavelength that I'm using is 90 or 100 as well. And that's actually what catches people out, is if they're plugging all of these different devices into a hub that's either got no external power supply or it's really low powered. That can be something that catches people out, where they'll call up Elgato and say my Stream Deck isn't working, but they've got like 10 of them plugged into a single unpowered hub. That's why the manufacturers, as I say, tell you to plug it into the device, because they want to just cover the backs against that. But absolutely, if you've got powered docks and hubs, then you can certainly power all this stuff off from it. So let's see. So sorry, let me just find where I'm up to again. Mention DisplayLink supports your 4 additional monitors. Do you mean the Wavelink docking station? So it is. I happen to be using a Wavelink dock, but it has DisplayLink technology. So the DisplayLink technology is the thing that allows you to power all of those other things. So as I say, there are other manufacturers, like Pluggable is one. Let's see. I'll find this Wavelink DisplayLink. Oops, I can't spell. Try that again. Here we go. So in Amazon, it's got to be, it will have the DisplayLink thing in the name of it somewhere, or it will be on the device itself. So you can see the DisplayLink icon in there. And this is actually, I think this one is the 2 one I've got. Oh no, that's triple. Hang on a minute. This is the one. So no, that's still the triple. I've got a dual HDMI one. I think maybe that one. The dual 4K one, and then also the 4 monitor. So if I put Wavelink 4 monitor, 4 HD or quad HDMI, let's try that. Quad HDMI will be something like this. Yeah, that's the one that I'm actually using, and that is, oh, there you go. It's 100 watts. So it's got 100 watts of power, and then it's got 4 HDMI outs that are using DisplayLink. So it's got that DisplayLink logo there. This is the exact one that I've got, and that allows me to plug in basically an additional 4 monitors, like over and above my allowance from the Mac Mini, which is 2. And also, like, this is in addition to the Elgato prompters as well. So what that means is I've got at the moment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 monitors plugged in, but actually 2 of those are just plugged directly into the Mac Mini or through an additional dock or whatever. So that's those 2. Then I've got 2 prompters as well. So I've got 2 monitors at the moment that are actually plugged into this dock. So I could have got away with the twin one, which I've also got downstairs, but actually what that means is I could potentially still plug in another 2 monitors to this computer, and then be able to power it all from that dock, which is useful because since I added in this touchscreen monitor down here. This monitor, basically, before I had a touchscreen, I used to have a monitor that was over here. So I've got a monitor-shaped hole in my setup. So I may well add another monitor in there, but we'll see. So yeah, that is the Wavelink dock. But yeah, it is specifically the fact that it has DisplayLink that is the thing that is giving it that extra capability. Brandy Joe, you got 2 Meet 2s, and they are great. They absolutely are. Were there any issues using dual Stream Decks? No, there aren't. And that actually brings me on to the Stream Decks, because I mentioned that Ecamm is doing all the heavy lifting in terms of, the live production. But really, the thing that pulls it all together is not the touchscreen monitor, although that is a nice to have. The thing that pulls it all together, though, are the Stream Decks. And actually, I've got the Stream Deck XL here, Stream Deck XL there, and then Stream Deck Plus here. And I've also got 2 Stream Deck pedals down on the floor. Now, the way that these work is you can think of them as basically just a keyboard. It is just a programmable keyboard, effectively, with a nice little feature, which is that you can change the image that is shown on the key, because each key is also a little screen in itself. And so that means that you can basically, have multiple pages of different keys that are doing different things, and you just program all of these. Now, this might look a little bit complicated in terms of having like all of these buttons, but really this is all of a lot of the same kind of actions that they're performing. So first of all, this one is where I control all the different camera angles. So my main camera at the moment, we're in this one, which is my little mobile camera, but I've also got like this camera here, this one behind me, this one here, and I'm just basically pressing through those buttons to cycle through those different things. This one's my top-down camera, and then come back to this one again. So basically those buttons there are all different camera angles. Then I've got different screen shares. Now I basically have this 43-inch screen over here, and I set it up with these different screen areas. So I kind of think of it as a sort of 2x3 grid, so I can move things around and put them in any one of those positions. But it means I could have potentially, 6 different things open that I might want to share as part of a tutorial or training or whatever, or a YouTube video. And then I want to just basically lock in on just that particular part of the screen. Well, I use a tool called Moom, which is for window positioning. So I have that linked to these buttons, and I can basically just move the thing around into whichever of those positions I want. Once it is in that position, I've then got scenes set up in Ecamm, and you saw how easy it is to just create a scene and crop into specific areas. So there I have these different screen share areas which correspond to those areas on the monitor. So this one would be to share that particular portion of the screen that we have up there. So that's what those are. These are cameras. These are screen shares, and then these are related to presentations and things like that. So although when you look at like the overall thing, it looks like, oh, there's a lot of complicated things going on there, it's really not. It's just a series of simple building blocks, and then I've got one to, start the stream, end the stream, and all of that kind of thing. And actually what I use is, you mentioned, is it difficult to have, or is there any issue with using dual Stream Decks? Actually, it works really well, because one of the issues you run into is you run out of buttons, and either you've got to create another page, so I can page between sort of different pages of buttons like this, or the other thing then that you can do is you can have completely separate profiles. So a profile being an entire collection of buttons or pages for different use cases. Now you can set that up in Stream Deck to sort of navigate between those profiles. But what I actually use is the Stream Deck Plus here has some dials, so we can control things in Ecamm, like I can control mic level and things like that to what's going out in the stream. From this, I can control my sort of zooming on the screen for my screen demos. But what these buttons do, though, is these basically change the profile on my other Stream Decks. So for example, if I'm doing my window management, I press a button over here and it's going to change that Stream Deck. If I want to change it back again, I press a button and it's going to change it back. So I'm using this one Stream Deck to change what is on those other two. But the reason why this is such a powerful piece of hardware in the studio is because it's really kind of unifying. It pulls together everything that you have going on with your live production software, whether that is OBS or Ecamm. OBS also has a plugin for Stream Deck, but Ecamm has a really sort of robust one that covers all the controls you might want to do in Ecamm. But what you can find is you're using Ecamm Live for your live production and streaming and switching and so on, but then you've got maybe Zoom running, or you've got your Keynote running, or screen share. And so it could feel like, you're juggling multiple different applications, but really the Stream Deck just brings it all together and it becomes your mission control. Now, although I've got sort of 3 on my desk and 2 on the floor, just one Stream Deck is going to make a huge difference. And the thing I'll say is, even if you're not necessarily massively serious about video and recording and streaming and all of those things. One of the things I'll say about the Stream Deck is it's a bit misnamed because it's got the word stream in the name, and you would think, well, it's a streaming device. It's really the ultimate productivity tool, because once you get one and realize, like, aside from the recording and streaming stuff, when you realize that actually it can integrate with everything else you're doing on your computer to, you know, open up all your apps and lay them out in a specific way, and you know, get yourself set up for particular workflows, and shortcuts that you've got in programs can then be programmed into the Stream Deck. You realize that, as I say, it's the ultimate productivity tool. So I recommend it to people who even aren't doing anything with streaming or video. You absolutely should consider getting a Stream Deck for just general productivity. And there is a formula for the optimum number of Stream Decks. It's however many you've got plus one, because you will find that they just kind of multiply. So yeah, that is the sort of glue that basically holds this all together. And I definitely recommend that you give them a try if you haven't already. So let me see. I've just got to see which this is following on from. So using dual Stream Decks. I've answered that one. Yeah, there's absolutely no issue with using dual Stream Decks, and they just show up in the Stream Deck application, and you can sort of program them all individually. And yeah, they actually work well together in the more you've got, because you can control one with the other, or at least control what's being shown on one with the other. But yeah, they're really powerful stuff. Hey, Parker, great to see you. Long time no see. You're up to 9 pages and want to separate certain commands. Yeah, somebody asked me once, like, when you've got pages where we can scroll across from one page to another, and we've got profiles, which is, you know, complete collections of pages, and we can separate those out. You know, why do I need more Stream Decks on my desk? Well, I'll tell you the reason that I added in my second Stream Deck XL was when basically in a live production scenario such as this, when I'd filled up a complete page, and then there were potentially other things that I wanted to be able to control, and I didn't have room for all of those. That's when I basically added in the second one, because what I didn't want to be doing was, like, during a live stream like this, let's say, scrolling over to another page because I want to activate something, and then come back to press the button that I think is going to take me back to my main camera, which is this one. Without looking, I can just instinctively feel it, because you get this sort of muscle memory of knowing where things are. Well, if I'd flicked onto another page, I might press something, and then, like, you know, some other notification pops up on screen or something like that. So that's the reason when I added in that second Stream Deck, was basically in a live scenario. If I've filled up the Stream Deck, then that is the point when I added in that other one. The other reason to add in another Stream Deck would be if you've got, let's say, the XL, then there is the Stream Deck Plus, which gives you that different functionality of having the dials and being able to control things with those as well. Or potentially the Stream Deck pedal, which allows you to do things like, advanced slides in your presentation, or switch scenes, or do all of the things we can do. But some things actually just are more suited to doing with your feet when you get used to it. Initially, obviously, it's a bit alien to think I'm controlling my computer with my feet, but certain things do work well. You know, if you've got your hands on the keyboard because you're typing, but then there's certain shortcuts that you want to activate that don't have a keyboard shortcut, then you can. It's useful to be able to control those sorts of things as well. So you're welcome. Glad you have found it useful. So the hub thing, yeah. So I use the CalDigit Element Hub as well. That is the hub that I've got. And then there is also, the reason why I get confused with CalDigit sometimes is when I'm talking about them, I've mixed my words up. But yeah, there's the CalDigit Element Hub, which is the hub, Thunderbolt into the computer, multiple USB-Cs and Thunderbolt out. And then they also have another one called the CalDigit TS3, TS4, TS5, which stands for Thunderbolt Station, I guess, 3, 4, and 5, and that's for Thunderbolt 3, Thunderbolt 4, and Thunderbolt 5. So, and that's going to be more like the, I know you know this because you've got the Element Hub, but the TS3, 4, and 5, and whatever, those are going to be those docks that give you all those different connections. So, yeah. Cool. Well, that runs through pretty much my my setup as it stands at the moment. Any other questions, feel free to shout out or drop them into the chat. I am getting back into posting my videos. So since the start of the year, I guess, I've posted a few videos, and it always used to be that I would post, well, actually I started out doing a video a day for the first 100 days and year. And then I've been so busy building things behind the scenes that sadly my YouTube has taken a bit of a backseat, apart from semi-regular live streams like this, technically weekly live streams, although I've taken a few breaks from this whenever I'm running a live training or whatever. But yeah, getting back into the regular videos. And so I've got a whole series of videos coming out about specific things. I did make a video about the touchscreen monitor from Dell. I've got a video that I'll be making about the Zoe box and the Amaran lights as well. And incidentally, one of the things that I've been building behind the scenes, if you don't mind me just doing a bit of shameless self-promotion, is I've been building out the Digital Stage Academy, and that's where you can get access to all of my courses for $27 a month or $270 a year. That's like the Stream Deck Masterclass, the Rodecaster Masterclass, outsourcing and Keynote and so on, as well as the community space, and that gives you access to the backstage for my live streams as well. So if you're interested in those sort of on-demand trainings and want to go deeper into any of the things we talked about, that is the Academy. And also part of what was the Academy for, well, still is, I suppose, but for 3 years we've had what we call the Academy VIP, and it's really more of a mastermind. And so I have completely rebranded this as the Momentum Mastermind, and actually I'm doing a sort of launch of it for the next couple of weeks, so through till the end of January. Then you can actually get that with a 40% discount. So check out the Momentum Mastermind, and that's basically where we have weekly accountability sessions, and this is a place to come and get your sort of tech questions answered. It is for people who want to actually show up and make real progress. It's not a sort of on-demand thing, although replays are available, but it's more than just the tech as well. It's about, as I say at the top, it's about building your online business, because that's who I speak to really in the Academy and in all of my online trainings. It's not just about how to set up studios, it's about how you can actually build a sustainable online video component to your existing business, or just build an entirely new business that is entirely video based, as indeed I've done over the past few years with Take One Tech. So that is the Momentum Mastermind. I've left a link to that in the chat, and you'll find it down in the description as well. I'll leave you to go and explore that. And of course, if you've got any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. You'll find my way to contact me on that page as well. But with that said, let's wrap it up. If there's any other questions that you have around my tech setup, feel free to drop them in before we go. So Brandy Joe, will I be doing a new video on the new Ecamm updates? Absolutely. I will have an update on the Ecamm beta when it comes out, and any new updates that come out from that. And yeah, I'll as always keep everyone up to date with what's going on with Ecamm as well. Cool. Well, with that said, I will just say have a wonderful day wherever you are, and I'll leave a link to some other related videos over here on this side a little bit later. In the meantime, don't forget to check out the Academy in case that's something of interest to you, and I'll see you all next time.